Hey guys, welcome back to Demons Forever. We are moving right along. We are on episode 17 today. If you missed last week's episodes, Monday's episode was a little bit slower, a little bit more like formulation of the plan, but then Wednesday's episode was really good with a bit of a shock there as Leah returns with some not so good news, and the timeline is bumped up. So they're on a ticking time clock now, and we are on a ticking time clock to the end of this particular book, or the first story arc as well. So in this week's episodes, you are going to get some extra information. So these are going to be pretty information heavy too, but you're finally going to find out some answers now about what happened to Harper's grandfather and why her father had to return to the shadow world instead of staying there with her and with Angela. So a lot of good information coming in, even though some of it is heartbreaking, but I do believe there's going to be, I need to always like go back because I haven't been through these. Yes. Okay. So Wednesday's episode, I was pretty sure this was coming this week. So Wednesday's episode is going to be something that is kind of one of those things that now that I'm into like, book 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, I take it for granted, and I've had to be very careful about not spilling the beans on this in terms of a twist or a secret. So today's episode is going to sort of set the stage for that, and then Wednesday's episode will reveal kind of one of the bigger twists of this series and is going to be some of the truth about some of these characters that you haven't known. And there's going to be kind of some twists going on throughout the rest of these because we've just got this information that sets up the ending that comes this week. And then next week we have episodes 19 and 20, and then the finale the week after that. So we are really getting down to the wire. Also on Friday's coffee chat, we talked a bit about the, it's kind of funny to say that because I'm actually recording all of these. If you noticed, I've got the same outfit I had on last week because I'm recording all of these on Monday, October 4th. So to say last Friday when it's actually the future, it's a little bit trippy, but I do know that on Friday we're going to talk about, now it's happened in the past, but we talked about the Spooktacular and that coming up. So we've got a lot of fun things coming. So make sure that you are following me, not only here on YouTube, but some of that stuff is going to be happening in 3 other places. So the Facebook page or the Coven. So I'm going to be posting things to my page and to the Coven. I'll also be posting things to Instagram, and I'll be posting things to Discord, or actually 4 places because I will also be posting Spooktacular stuff on my website every day. So make sure you're following me in one of those places if you really want to get all the giveaways, all the fun Spooktacular, like where there's going to be funny memes and spooky stories and all kinds of stuff. And I will share some of it here on YouTube, but some of it will be in those other places as well. So I'm looking forward to this spooky time of year with you guys. It's always so much fun, and I am so glad that you're here. So we are going to just go straight into it. We are on episode 17 today, and where I left you last Wednesday was that Leah came back to the Crow Village and dropped basically a bomb, which is how we're going to start off this episode today, that Andros has decided that he's going to mobilize the resistance army, which is thousands of demons, and they are going to assassinate all of the primas and their children, which will essentially kill all of the demon gates across the world. And they're going to start with the southern states, which of course is where Harper is. And if they do that, they're basically going to be assassinating Harper to end the Peachville Gate, right? So that is the plan, which means that Jackson, Harper, and all of their friends, they only have a handful of days. They have 4 days before these assassinations take place. Now, they do have some of the ritual items that Harper was able to retrieve from Brooke's house. They have the chalice, the necklace, and the dagger or whatever, but they need to, and of course they have the ring, but they need to actually prepare and get this whole thing done. And now they only have a couple of days to do it because Leah just dropped this announcement that the only way she was able to get away from Andros was that she agreed to be the assassin that kills Harper when the time comes. So they got 4 days, and Leah has some explaining to do. So let's get into it. This is chapter 65, the bomb Leah had just dropped. The quiet village erupted in shouts. I lunged at Leah, but Jackson gripped my arms and held me back. He pressed his mouth to my ear. She's not actually going to do it. Calm down. How do you know she's not planning to do it? I asked. She's hated me from the first time she laid eyes on me. Angela and all the others shouted over each other, trying to make sense of the bomb Leah had just dropped on us. Everyone sit down, Jackson said, his voice rising above the rest. Give her a chance to explain herself. I yanked my arm away from Jackson's grasp and straightened my clothes, my face and neck hot with anger. Through all the commotion, Leah said nothing. She waited for everyone to quiet down and settle back into their seats before she spoke. Of course, I'm not planning to actually go through with it, she said. You should know me well enough by now to know I wouldn't do that. I stared ahead, my teeth clenched and my breath fast and uneven. How could I possibly know her well enough when she'd always kept me at arm's length? I knew this was the only way to get away from Andros in order to warn you about the resistance, she said. If I'd come to you any other way, Andros would have labeled me a traitor and thrown me in the dungeons. I don't understand why you couldn't convince him that Peachville needed to be left alone, I said. He couldn't at least start on the other side of the country? There are gates in Europe. He couldn't start there? Even if the demons in the underground don't all like me, a lot of them were friends with Airden. Killing me and closing the gate means killing him too. How could they do that to their friend? Unlike Jackson, most of them don't hold out any hope that Airden can be saved. She fidgeted. Besides, I didn't exactly volunteer for the job. Andros and the council offered it to me. They told me it was a way to end your life and get Jackson back for myself. I started toward her again, but Jackson's hand gripped mine. So, you lied and said that's what you wanted, Jackson said, emphasizing the word lied. Yes, she said, her eyes focused on my face. Even if you don't believe me, I've let go of the idea that Jackson and I can ever be together. I can't say I understand it, but I see how he feels about you. I know there's nothing I could ever do to change that, not even if I killed you, which I won't. I settled into a chair beside Jackson on the porch, letting her words sink in. How exactly do you plan to get out of this? I asked. Don't you think they'll notice if I'm still alive in 4 days? They'll just send someone else after me, right? What then? I hadn't gotten that far, she said. I thought maybe you could go into hiding. How far are you from attempting this ritual you were talking about? If we could go to Andros and show him proof the Shadow Demon slaves can be freed, it could change everything. Why kill so many all at once anyway? I asked. You said the resistance plans to attack the gates in the south, right? That's got to be at least, 100 gates? 116, Sarra said. She'd been so quiet I'd almost forgotten she was here. All gates under my mother's rule. Andros wants to hit as many as he can all at once in order to maintain the element of surprise, Leah said. If he started with 1, that would alert the Order to his plan, and they would set up guards for the Primas and the portals, maybe even send the Primas into hiding for a while. Each gate would become a full-on battleground, which is what he's trying to avoid in the first place. If he kills them all at once, they'll all be taken by surprise, and he can close over 100 gates in a single day. That's why he's sending these assassins out early, then? Jackson asked, to investigate the town and the Primas. Yes, Leah said. Each team has a lead assassin who has already been sent out to their assigned town. Their job is to watch the Prima and figure out her schedule. They need to see how often the portal is used and how difficult it will be to get to when the time is right, that sort of thing. Andros gave us 2 days to gather the information we need before we're supposed to go back and give him an update and assemble the rest of our team. Then we'll have 1 day to get in place before the actual assassination. The 4th day, we're supposed to kill the Primas at 8 in the morning. That only really gives us 3 days to attempt the ritual, I said. There's too much that still has to be done. You'll have to find a way to move faster, Leah said. Short of this ritual working and the demons going free, there's no way Andros is backing down from his plan. I leaned over, my head in my hands. 3 days. I had no idea how, but we were going to have to find a way to pull this off. The future of both our worlds depended on it. Chapter 66, So Many Secrets. Jackson offered to show Leah to one of the rooms he and Essex had cleared out in the blue house where Angela was staying. Leah didn't have much with her, only a small bag and a few weapons. She stood, but as she passed behind Sarra, her eyes flickered to the family tree Sarra had been working on all day. "What's this?" Leah asked, her eyebrows cinched together in the middle. Sarra turned. "Harper asked me to write down everything I can remember about my family's history," she said. "I decided to write out a family tree going back all the way to Eloisa Winter, the first priestess of the Order of Shadows." Leah set her bag back down and leaned over the paper, studying it with great focus. "What is it?" Jackson asked. "Do you recognize someone?" "Look at this." Leah ran her index finger across several lists of daughters. "Don't you find it a little bit odd that each generation has exactly 3 daughters?" I walked around to see what she was talking about. I studied the tree for a moment and realized she was right about each generation except the first one. Eloisa had been one of 5 daughters, the original sisters who created the order. Eloisa had 3 daughters of her own. Her eldest daughter also had 3 daughters, and every single prima since her had also had exactly 3 daughters. Sarra said, tapping the page with her sparkly green pen. "I don't know why I've never noticed this before. It makes perfect sense, though, since each of the 3 has a very specific job to do." "What kind of job?" Marianne asked. "We all know the oldest daughter becomes the prima, or in this case, the next priestess Winter," Leah said, pointing to the names of the oldest daughters in each generation. "But what about the 2 younger daughters?" Sarra sat straight up as if a teacher had asked her a question. "Thirds, like me, are guardians and trainers," she said. "My Aunt Mary and my great-aunt Catherine are my mother's most trusted guards. They live with us at Winterhaven and are usually watching over the portal stone and the house unless Mother needs them." "They never married?" I asked. Sarra shook her head and her voice became softer. "No, thirds are not allowed to marry or have children of their own. We are taught from a young age that our role will be to protect the priestess and the home." "What about the seconds?" Angela asked. "What job do they have?" Sarra stared at the names she'd written on the family tree. She bit her lower lip, her expression troubled. "What's wrong?" I asked. I'd never seen her so upset, except maybe when her mother had tried to kill me. "It's very curious," she said. "This doesn't make any sense. I've studied my family tree for years, hoping to find answers about the change in my own mother, but never once until this moment did it occur to me that I have never met any of the seconds except my sister Honora. In fact, I don't know where they are. I don't know if they're alive or dead." "Your mother never talks about her sister Cora?" I asked, looking at the names on the paper. "Or her Aunt Janine?" Sarra shook her head. "It's as if no one remembers they existed," she said, her normally cheerful voice cracking slightly. "Isn't that the weirdest thing?" I shivered, thinking of Lydia Ashworth's sister. No, it was not the weirdest thing. I knew exactly what it meant when no one could remember you existed. It meant you'd been sacrificed, or at least that's what it had meant in Lydia's sister's case. Was the same thing happening to the seconds in the Winter family? And if so, what were they being sacrificed for? "What is it that the seconds do?" Angela asked. "What do you mean?" Sarra asked. She seemed dazed. "Their job. You said that each of the 3 daughters have their own specific purpose," Angela said. "What's the second's purpose?" Sarra stared ahead for a long moment, her lips parted slightly. "I should know the answer to this," she finally said. "But for some reason I can't tell you. I can't remember." "Your memory's been altered," Angela said, placing her hand on Sarra's. "I have a lot of experience with memory spells, and I recognize the signs in your tone and demeanor. If no one had pointed this out to you, you probably never would have realized it on your own." "Why?" Sarra asked, her face crumpling. What do you think happened to them? Why would someone try to hide it? No one answered her because no one knew the answer, except maybe me, but I was still trying to put things together in my mind. I didn't want to upset Sarra any more than she already was. There's something else here that's odd, Leah said. Jackson peered over my shoulder. What? The dates each new prima took over, she said. She pointed to the dates on the paper when the reigning Priestess Winter died and her eldest daughter took over as prima. 2004, 1977, 1955, 1929, and so on. These dates are significant. These are all years when some of the largest and most powerful demon gates in this area of the country were massacred, the gates closed, and all of their witches and demons murdered. I gasped. Are you sure? How do you know that? I've been studying this since I first came to the human world almost 50 years ago, Leah said. I always wondered if there wasn't some kind of pattern or significance to the dates, but I could never figure it out. Sometimes there were 25 years between the massacres. Sometimes there were 30 years or more. There were some smaller gates destroyed along the way, but it was the big ones that were always spread out like this. I could never put a pattern to it. You're talking about the killing of an entire Demon Gate coven, right? I asked, like what you showed me in Aldine when Priestess Winter cut that prima's throat. Sarra clasped a hand to her mouth and sat down. I cringed. I hadn't meant to be so heartless. Did she not know what her mother was capable of? That's exactly what I'm talking about, Leah said. She pointed to the dates on the tree when the oldest Priestess Winter died each generation. Aldine was small, though. Every single one of these dates marks the death of the most significant demon gates on this side of the United States. Gates with powerful prima demons and more than 100 witches in their covens. Wait a second, Jackson said. He pushed toward the front and ran his finger furiously along some of the dates. Sarra, you said you were 5 years old when your mother took over as prima, right? Sarra nodded, her eyes wide and scared. That's when you said she started acting strange and different, as if she wasn't herself, Jackson said. Look at the birthdays of all the third daughters, and then look at the dates of each Priestess Winter's death. Sarra's hand moved to her mouth and tears ran down the side of her face. Each time the new prima took over, her youngest daughter was exactly 5 years old, she said in a whisper. She looked up at Jackson, doubt and fear in her eyes. What does this mean? I don't know, he said, but it's got to be significant in some way. Each Priestess Winter has died before the age of 65, Leah said. Doesn't that seem strange to you? Primas are supposed to be notoriously difficult to kill. That should be especially true of the priestesses. So, what did each of these women die of so young? Sarra, I asked, putting my hand on her shoulder, what did your grandmother die from? She shook her head. I don't know. I can't remember. A sob escaped from her mouth and she clamped her hand over the top of it. It's possible someone messed with that memory too, Angela said. Most people know how their grandparents passed away, especially if it happened at such a young age like 61. Ever since I was a little girl, I felt something strange was going on in my house, but I didn't want to believe it, Sarra said, her eyes red and full of sorrow. I had no idea there were so many secrets being kept from me. We're going to figure this all out, I said, trying to keep my voice calm for her sake. There has to be a reason why things always happen in this pattern and why someone took special care to alter your memories. Sarra turned and buried her head in my shirt. She began to cry, sobs shaking her body. I knew those sobs all too well, and it broke my heart to hear them coming from someone like Sarra. They were the sobs of a girl who'd only just realized the true pain of betrayal. Chapter 67, Dark Magic. I sat at the small table in the house Jackson and I shared, staring at my notes about Zara's family. The key to understanding Priestess Winter was here somewhere. I could feel it. If we could figure out a weak spot, we would have a real chance to bring her down. But what was I still missing? The pieces of the puzzle were scattered across the table. I'd been over them at least 20 times since dinner. Jackson had already gone to bed, but I couldn't sleep. The clock was ticking now, with the resistance expecting Leah to murder me in just 3 days. I sighed and went over the details again. Each first, or prima futura, in the Winter family always had 3 daughters of her own. The first daughter would always grow up to become the next Priestess Winter. The second daughter was a mystery, possibly sacrificed for the sake of dark magic. The thirds became guardians of the priestess, trained to fight and to protect, and never allowed to have families of their own. Each time a third turned 5 years old, 2 major events occurred within that year. Her grandmother died, making her mother the reigning Prima and Priestess Winter. Also, a major demon gate was destroyed, killing hundreds of witches and demons. What could those 2 things possibly have in common? Were those witches fuel for another sacrifice of some sort? I knew the answer to Priestess Winter's power was here in front of me. I just couldn't seem to put it together. I fell asleep at the table hours later, dreaming of the ritual daggers and dark magic. Chapter 68, Tennessee, 1995. I missed something yesterday, Leah said when she joined us at breakfast the next morning. The whole group had gathered to discuss the day's plan and talk about what we knew so far. Something about my family tree? Sarra asked, her eyes still red this morning. Had she been crying all night? Yes. Leah ripped a piece of bacon in 2 and popped 1/2 into her mouth. Last night I kept going over the dates in my head. I knew I was missing something, so I wrote down every demon gate I could remember that had been destroyed in the last 50 years. She pulled a small piece of paper from the pocket of her black leather pants. I reached for it and leaned over the table to pass it to me. She leaned over the table to pass it to me. There were 8 dates listed, 5 in black and 3 in red. What are the ones in red? I asked. Those are the major towns. The ones I was saying had the most powerful prima demons and at least 100 or more witches in the coven. Those dates correspond with the year Priestess Winter died, and her oldest daughter became the new Priestess Winter. Leah paused until I looked up and met her dark gaze. All of them except one. I looked at the dates and noticed one at the very bottom was circled. Tennessee, 1995. I suddenly felt as if I'd had the breath knocked out of me. That's the year I was born, I said. Exactly, Leah said, raising a single eyebrow. This was a large demon gate town with an extremely powerful prima demon. Besides the original 5 gates, like Winterhaven, this was probably one of the most powerful gates in existence. According to the pattern, Priestess Winter should have died that same year. Only she didn't. The Priestess Winter who murdered that town's prima didn't pass away until 2004. It has to mean something. My head pounded. I'd barely gotten any sleep, trying to see the meaning in all this information. Now she was giving me another piece that seemed to show I was stuck in the middle of all this somewhere. But how? Angela took the small paper from me and studied it. 1995, she said. What town did you say that was? Leah leaned forward, elbows against the table. A small town just outside of Nashville, Tennessee. Clement, I think it was called. My head snapped up. Clement? I asked, my heart racing. My breath stopped in my chest and the world began to spin as I remembered my conversation with my father. Clement is the name of the town where my grandfather died. Angela put her hand on my arm. The year makes sense, she said. That's the year my father left, when he went back to the demon world to take over as the king of the South. Maybe our grandfather was the prima demon there in Clement. I put my hand on my chest. He couldn't have been the prima demon in that town. Leah, you said it was an older gate, right? One of the earliest ones created? She nodded. It was opened sometime around 1915. See, our grandfather couldn't have been trapped in Clement since 1915, I said. He was ruling the Southern Kingdom when our father first came to Peachville in 1985. None of this makes sense. Why would he have been killed along with the rest of that town? Is it possible he was pulled through for a regular initiation? Jackson shook his head. No way. The hunters never would have chosen someone as powerful as your grandfather for a normal initiation ceremony. Angela brought a hand to her temple. Then why would he have even been there? She asked. I took a deep breath and looked at Leah. There's only one way to find out. Okay, end of chapter or episode 17. So what do you think is about to happen if there's only one way to find out? What is it? If you can figure that out, then you know what the basis of chapter 18 or episode 18 is going to be. And we have to figure out if Leah is willing to do it or not. But you're starting to clue in on some of the mystery of this. How do all these things come together? And so in Wednesday's episode, you will finally get a piece of that puzzle. And then throughout the next couple of weeks, obviously all will be revealed, except not everything, because of course there's still some things to figure out in the second half of the series, starting with book 7, Emerald Darkness. But I hope you guys are enjoying this. This definitely brings back my memories of why I love this series so much, and why this book in particular was not only difficult, but really, really fun for me to write. And it's starting to get me excited for writing book 12. I cannot wait. I hope that you guys have been enjoying these. Again, this was just a 7-page, so it was just short like last Wednesday. But on this Wednesday, we do have a 9-page chapter, so it will be a little bit longer. I know that these have been a little bit variable in length just because we aren't doing the live streams anymore. But hopefully you're still enjoying it and still enjoying the chat on the side for the premieres. I've definitely been enjoying it. Be sure that you're subscribed and hit that like button down below. And I will see you guys in Wednesday's really gruesome and exciting. I'm smiling as I say gruesome, but so many answers coming on Wednesday, and I hope you guys are looking forward to it. I can't wait to see your reaction for those of you who have not read this story yet. So I will see you on Wednesday, and then we will have our normal coffee chat on Friday. So I will see you guys then. Bye.